Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our next presentation, our second session of the day. And so that would be Biostabilization Erosion Control Techniques, and that is led by Callie Moore, who is the Western Regional Director of Mountain True. So Callie served as the director of the Hiwassee River Watershed Coalition for 17 years until the organization merged with Mountain True in 2019. She has a master's degree in water resources from Indiana University and is a graduate of Western Carolina University's Environmental Health Program. Before HRWC, Callie was a river basin planner for the NCDENR Division of Water Quality, during which time she worked extensively in several WNC river basins, including the Hiwassee, Little Tennessee, and Savannah. Other prior work experience includes water quality monitoring, sediment and erosion control compliance inspections, and environmental education for the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation and the Tennessee Valley Authority. Callie is a graduate of the Institute for Georgia Environmental Leadership Chatouche, and served on the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation Community Leadership Council. So thank you so much for joining us today, Callie, and feel free to take it away.
Okay, thanks so much for having me. I am gonna drop in the chat right now a link to a Georgia publication related to stream bank and shoreline stabilization. A lot of the techniques and things that I'm going to be talking about are found in that document. It's one of the best publications that we've found for biostabilization. I don't know, if you will. So I'm going to drop that in right now just because I'm afraid I'll forget to do it later. And so there it is. Okay, screen sharing. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see slides now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I will, let's see, let's make this full screen. I will mention a little bit in advance. I too have had some technical difficulties, but it's been more related to my schedule. I've had a family member that's been in the hospital and she's doing okay now, but I had intended to spend more time downsizing my presentation. So initially this is a 3-hour workshop. And so I downsized it into 1 hour. And so for those of you like myself that are like real nitpicky about the fonts all being the same, like you're going to hate me at the end of this hour because I pulled slides from several different presentations and they had all different backgrounds and all different fonts. So anyway, just bear with me on that part. So just a little bit about Mountain True first. Mountain True is an environmental advocacy organization that champions healthy forests, clean water, and strong communities throughout the Southern Blue Ridge Mountains. And we focus on a set of core issues that has high impact on environmental health and long-term prosperity of the region. That includes improving water quality, which is what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to give you a little background information on the subject matter, which is basically excess sedimentation of our streams in North Georgia. And then I'm going to talk about what to do about it, which is the main purpose of the seminar. I'm also going to talk about riparian buffers, what they are and why they're important, and what the #1 threat to them is. So if you're involved in Georgia Adopt a Stream, you already know what is a watershed, but some of you may not be certified AAS volunteers. And so a watershed, I use that term a lot when I'm talking. So I just want to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say what is a watershed. A watershed is an area of land that drains to a common point. So in this particular slide, we have a dam here on the Notley River in the top left corner. And everything that's shaded yellow is the Notley River watershed or the Notley Lake watershed. And this is in Union County, Georgia, way up near the North Carolina line. But the area, the land is what's important when you're talking about a watershed. So yes, we have all these streams, they're draining to a river, they're draining to a lake, and we love the water and we want to focus on the water, but the pollution is coming off of the landscape. And so if you were here for the last talk, you heard Anna talking about the difference between non-point sources of pollution and point sources of pollution. Everything I'm talking about today is non-point source pollution. It's stuff that's coming off the landscape from our activities that are going on in a given watershed. And this is a map of my territory, the upper Hiwassee River Basin. And so you can see here again, Notley Reservoir there in Union County, and then also Towns County, Georgia. Young Harris and Hiwassee are the two cities. So just a minute about, like with defining watershed, I'm also going to define what I mean when I say water quality. So when you think about water quality, a lot of times you're talking about going out there and sampling it. Are there PFAS in here, right? So that's what we were talking about for the past hour. The physical and chemical parts of water quality are a huge part, and we monitor those, and they tell us a lot. But the biological and habitat components of our streams and rivers are also part of water quality and have a big impact on those physical and chemical parameters. And so most of what I'm going to be talking about today is the habitat component that mainly affects the biology. Although there are implications for excess sedimentation related to drinking water supplies and recreation and other things, the primary impact is the biology, the aquatic life in the streams. So up here in North Georgia and in the Hiwassee River Basin, excess sediment is our primary water quality concern. In some areas, we have concerns with excess nutrients and pathogens, things like bacteria and viruses, which you figure out by sampling E. coli. And we have too much runoff in general because we don't have stormwater rules in most of our communities. And so, but anyway, excess sediment's the number one, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So this is what I'm talking about, muddy water, basically. And so you may be wondering why, if there's already like soil on the bottom of the stream, like why this is a concern. Well, it's mainly a concern, like I said, for the biota that live in there, because they breathe oxygen through the water. They filter the water basically and get the oxygen out of it, and that's how they breathe. So when the water is muddy like this, they have a lot of trouble with that. They also have trouble feeding and spawning. So where does the excess sediment come from? Well, again, up here in North Georgia, a lot of times we don't have appropriate best management practices in place. Now, I will say that Georgia has a much better system for making sure that there is somebody who understands what best management practices need to be in place, and they're supposed to be on site making that happen. And a lot of more jobs in recent years have been fined because they did not have those certified people in place, and that's awesome. On the North Carolina side of my line, we still don't have any of that. So we have a lot of trouble up here with runoff from construction. And, you know, I'm going to go through these, but all of these activities, we can build roads, we can build homes, we can build businesses and parking lots, we can harvest timber, we can do all these things as long as we do it right. We put the appropriate practices in place to protect water quality. So I'm not advocating against development or anything like that. I'm just saying we got to protect water quality because this excess sedimentation is a huge problem. So stream bank erosion is also a huge part of the excess sedimentation puzzle. So it's not all from land disturbing activities. Some of it is a lot to do with historical practices that have removed the native vegetation, that have straightened the stream, that have moved streams in many cases. And I'm talking about, when I'm talking about history, I'm not talking about a couple decades ago, I'm talking about like 100 years ago when white settlers first came into this area and wanted to farm, you know. And so we have a lot of problems that are really historical in nature. They're not caused by the people that are necessarily they're living there now. So when you're going to address an erosion problem, the first thing is that you really need to know what the real problem is. A lot of times bank erosion is coming from runoff from other parts of your property. It could be coming just simply from a lack of trees and shrubs. I mean, you may not need to do any of these like major things that I'm going to talk about. You may just need to plant trees and shrubs to fix your erosion problem. It could be coming from wave action or hydrologic modification, is what I was talking about when they've moved the stream or they've straightened it out along a property line or something like that. And I already mentioned the historic land uses. And these historic land uses, in some cases, have created channel instability over a large portion of the watershed. And so in those cases, it's very difficult just to do some of these simple homeowner-based biostabilization practices to fix the problem, because if the channel is really unstable, it's going to tear out any of that work as well. So you want to remove or minimize the source of the problem first. And, you know, if you suspect that you have a larger problem, and hopefully by the end of this and by using that Georgia EPD guide and other resources, which I'll mention, you can figure it out whether or not you need an expert. So in the case of channel instability, and so like I said, these little backyard stabilization solutions that you can implement on your own are not going to solve the problem. So this is in North Carolina. It's a straightened stream, a stream that was straightened historically between a property boundary, and it now flows through the middle of a park. So you can see in the picture on the left how straight it was and how much erosion there was. And the stream, you know, streams are kind of living beings in a way. And so they have this, this pattern and profile that is what's most efficient for carrying the water and the natural sediment load of their watershed. So that area of land that drains to them, they have this natural, you know, way that they need to be in order to move that water and sediment. And when we monkey with them, they spend every minute of every day, because they have nothing else to do, trying to get back to that natural pattern and profile. So they're going to erode everything away until they can get back to that point. So the premise of stream restoration, like true full-on stream restoration, is to speed up that natural process of putting the natural pattern and profile back. Now, these projects are huge. They require tons of permitting, tons of planning, tons of engineering, and you have to have an environmental consultant that manages them. And then you have to have a contractor that implements them, that knows what they're doing in terms of stream restoration. So I'm not advocating that you know, try to go down this path. I'm just saying that when there's larger instability issues in the watershed, this is the way that, you know, really they need to be solved. Now, that's not to say that you can't put a Band-Aid on a little curve like this in the bottom right, but you need an expert advice to help you move forward. So I'm just going to go through these. We, in North Carolina, we've been able to do, North Carolina has a lot of grant funding available for stream and watershed restoration work. We do not typically do stream restoration through mitigation banks. So it's a little bit different in Georgia, but we have been able to get grant funding to fix instability problems on the North Carolina side of the line. And so in this case, in order to put the pattern and profile back, you see this three trunked tree that's the same in both photos. In the picture on the right, the stream is back behind there. So we've actually moved it away from the fence and put the natural pattern and profile back, and then planted the riparian buffer. And so this project happened in 2004. This is about 2008, 4 years later. And here's what it looked like in 2014. If you went there today, you would have no idea that anyone did anything with that stream. I mean, it looks like it's just been as natural and real like that as always. This is another project, just an example. We got Department of Transportation funds to help with this because it was next to the railroad. And then here's another one that was more localized, that we just did some benching and installed a structure in a stream. But again, these are not the focus of my talk. I was just letting you know that, you know, there are more serious problems that require bigger solutions. All right, so now we're going to start getting into more of the biostabilization techniques. This is a larger project than most of you are going to encounter at Murphy High School in North Carolina, but this is something that would easily be permitted and is discussed in the Georgia technical guidance as well. It's called geolifts, and it's basically a soil wrap technique where you create layers of soil wrapped in an erosion control matting. And then in between each of those layers, you see all those little pink twigs. Those are actually brush whips of vegetation, things like silky dogwood, where you can cut off a whip of a tree or shrub that's existing and stick it in. As long as you put it in the right way, it will sprout a whole new plant. Live staking is a similar procedure that we'll talk about again in a minute. All right, this is my case study for a backyard bank stabilization project that we did in Union County. I forget which creek, Ivy Log, I believe, is the name of the creek in Union County. So this gentleman did not have massive channel instability in the watershed. And you can see here that the primary problem with the bank was just that somebody had removed all the native trees and shrubs, or most of them, such that the other ones that were still existing fell in. So what we did after getting permits, because this is a trout stream, we had to have a trout buffer waiver. The bank is reshaped, and more gradual slope makes the stream bank less likely to erode in a storm event. And then after reshaping, of course, you've got to stabilize this. And so we used erosion control blanket matting and planted with native trees and shrubs. So you literally cut holes in the matting and plant the trees and shrubs through it. Uh-oh, I'm missing a picture here. Well, you're going to see more pictures of live stakes in just a minute. So we also live stake at the water's edge with plants like silky dogwood or black willow that are pushed into the reshaped bank through the matting near the water line, and these sprout and add root mass near the water's edge. So live staking is a great technique, and especially if you have a small stream with, that doesn't have a lot of power, if you're not in the mountains and it's not got waterfalls on it or something like that, this is a really easy way to reestablish the riparian vegetation. And so there's four primary, there's a whole lot more actually, but there's four primary wetland shrub tree species that you can just cut an existing stake, and you can actually order these off the internet. You can buy them at some local nurseries, and you sharpen the end, and then you basically just stick it in the ground at an angle, and the live cuttings become new plants. So this is a picture of another project where we did the reshaping of the bank, and you can see all the little twigs down there. That's the live stakes that are at the water's edge. And then ultimately we came back and planted trees and shrubs in the matting up above that. And so basically these new, these little, you can see there, same project, the live stakes becoming new little shrubs. It's really awesome. So this is the finished Ivy Log project there at the end, and it's harder to see the live stakes on this picture, but anyway, I wish I had in the presentation, but I just couldn't find it on the fly this morning. The actual, oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Left and right, before and after. So you can see there that you've got a much better scenario for Ivy Log Creek there in the end. So this is another example. This is on Lake Chattooga in Towns County. This is the Boundary Waters Resort and Marina. And because it's a marina, you've got a lot of boat traffic and you've got wave action happening. I don't know about the rest of Georgia, but our North Georgia lakes are really getting hammered with wake boats and things that are really, my opinion, too big to be on our North Georgia lakes, which are relatively small. So we have a lot of problem with this. So riprap, in this case, we place the riprap rock at the toe of the slope at the normal water level. Now I'm going to talk again about riprap in just a minute, because there's a whole reason why you do not want to put riprap on this entire bank. And then there's this coconut fiber roll. Well, you put down the erosion control matting. This is a heavy dutier one than the one we used on the Shawnee project, because you've got the wave action. So this has to be thicker and more rope-like. And then you put this, so you make a little bench with the matting above the riprap, and then you place this coconut fiber roll in there. And you secure the coconut fiber roll in place, and then another lighter weight, the original erosion control matting that we used on the first project is up at the top and forms kind of like a little trough. And then you backfill the trough with soil. So you can see this best in the picture on the left. So you've got that erosion control, you've got that coconut fiber roll, and then you've got your little trough of matting with the soil in it. And then you put these bare root tree seedlings, again, like silky dogwood and black willow. This is more like the Murphy High School track project where we're using the whips. So you lay them on the dirt, and then you put another layer of erosion control matting and the soil and tree seedlings, same thing. It's like making lasagna. You just layer them one after the other. And then after just 2 months, I mean, you have to do this the right time of year, of course. You need to do this, you know, in the dormant season, kind of like March. Now is a good time to do this. February, March, early April. Actually, even in other places and closer in South Georgia, January would probably work because y'all's spring comes much earlier. So you can see the stuff sprouting, and the coconut roll is going to receive the brunt of the wave action. That's the whole point of having it there. So here's before and after from the Boundary Waters project, and it's actually still beautiful. And these shrubs that we planted down here, they kind of have like a rental cabin at the top of this bank, so they didn't want to block the view of the lake. So the shrubs that are down there are blooming shrubs. They're all native plants. And we just planted a couple of trees at the top. So, I mean, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to necessarily block your view of your lake or river in order to also protect water quality. Okay, so why not just put rocks all over that bank, which is mostly what you see, right? So riprap or hardening, when you put all those rocks on the bank, they heat up. And in a stream environment, so they're going to heat the water as well. And you might be surprised. You're not surprised if you live in an urban environment and you monitor stormwater, because you know how much just one little old parking lot can heat the water that's flowing off of it. But to have these big rocks, like just these big heat sinks, like right next to the water is poor. And especially up here where we've got trout waters and we really need to have that cold water environment. Also, in a stream environment, it encourages the flow to keep moving. So a lot of times, like in the Shawnee situation on Ivy Log Creek, if we'd have just gone in there and riprap that, then his downstream neighbor would probably be calling us the next year, because all of that force of that flow is going on down to his property and undercutting his trees and causing bank erosion. And then we have to riprap him too, and on down the line, okay? And so the hardening solutions really cause a lot of trouble for your downstream spaces. Also, this provides very little habitat. When you've got roots and trees and things on the bank of the stream, those roots are all in the water, and the little aquatic macroinvertebrates that the fish feed on are living in there and feeding off of them. And there's just all kinds of twigs, and of course the leaves are falling in the fall. And you know, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the natural stream environment. And so when you put rock on the bank, you're depriving the stream or lake shoreline of that habitat. Also, it's typically the most expensive solution. This matting and coconut roll and dirt and twigs that you can cut yourself, these are in most cases, very low cost solutions. Whereas bringing in a dump truck load of rock, and then you have to also consider, like, how is it going to get to the stream bank, and is it going to tear up your yard? And you've got all these considerations that people really don't think about until the dump truck is sitting there with this big load of rock. And it's typically not permanent. I mean, sometimes it can be if you have a really small stream and you have really big rocks, but especially in the shoreline environment, you have to do it year after year. So with bioengineering practices, the plants stay cool. They typically slow down the flow. They trap the dirt between the spaces of the roots. They provide lots of habitat. Typically they're lower cost, and if they're left alone, they will continually regenerate indefinitely. So just a little bit more about riparian buffers, because this is so important. when we say riparian, we simply mean streamside. Riparian is a legal term that was developed associated with water rights battles and stuff out west, but it just means streamside or next to water. There's strips of varying widths consisting of native vegetation bordering a stream, river, or lake. And in the mountains, especially, we really need in riparian buffers, like in some places where it's flatter and sandier, you can just have a setback and have grasses planted in it. And that will still somewhat filter water quality and protect the stream and streams or lake shorelines. But in the mountains, we have flow, we have slope, we have, you know, tight spaces and gorges, and you can't have, you know, just a setback and protect water quality. You've got to have those native trees and shrubs in there in order to get your essential water quality functions. So healthy buffers filter runoff, they moderate water temperature, they protect your property and control erosion. They take up nutrients, which is another important function that we're not talking about today, only sediment. And they also provide wildlife habitat and community value. And on lake shorelines, they buffer the noise also. It is amazing the difference in boat traffic noise with having native trees and shrubs, particularly in the summertime. So the biggest threat to existing riparian buffers that we have, I mean, the biggest threat to bank erosion is people have removed the riparian buffer, the native trees and shrubs in the buffer, right? But the biggest threat to the existing buffers is non-native invasive plants. So non-native invasive plants, I mean, I'm sure there's been so much more, you know, in recent years about this, so you probably already know all this stuff, but they're plants that are not found in a particular area. Most of them were considered valuable for one reason or another at the time that they were introduced, although not all. Some of them were accidentally introduced into our area. They have very few natural pests or enemies in order to slow their growth. And that's the biggest issue. They're often more aggressive reproducers than native species. And, you know, in most cases are almost totally useless to native wildlife. So, missing another little photo here. So previously the Hiwassee River Watershed Coalition and now Mountain Trees Western Regional Office, which is where I work, we have identified the top 10 least wanted invasive plants, and we have the website developed. You can see it there on the bottom of the screen. And I can try to remember to put that in the chat as well. But we have fact sheets for each of these 10, and they are Japanese honeysuckle, Chinese privet, English ivy, bamboo, non-native bamboo. We do have one native bamboo, which is river cane. Let's see, Japanese knotweed, mimosa, which is a Florida tree, and it's native in South Georgia, but it's very invasive up here. Oriental bittersweet, kudzu, and I don't know what the 10th one is because I don't have a photo. Anyway, that's, if Tony was here, he could tell me, but he's not, so we'll move on. Anyway, there's a PDF fact sheet of each one of these top 10, and it has recommended native alternatives. So if you have it and you like it, we recommend native alternatives that are similar that you can plant when you remove them. So why are invasive plants so bad? Well, most of them have shallow, weak roots, and they're almost useless for bank stabilization. Now, this is not true of Chinese privet. Chinese privet does provide bank stabilization, but the issue with Chinese privet is, I mean, it's pushing out the native plants, and what happens is Chinese privet is not deciduous. It does not have leaves. I mean, some of its little tiny stupid leaves do fall off, you know, periodically it sheds some, but it is not providing that leaf, that native leaf and twig material that a native tree or shrub is going to provide, that the macroinvertebrates eat and feed on and process for nutrients in the stream environment. So even though you're getting bank stabilization with Chinese privet, you're not getting the other functions of a native riparian buffer. Many of them, especially like multiflora rose, that's the 10th one, multiflora rose. They create impassable thickets. And so wildlife can't use these riparian buffers as a transportation corridor. And and also vines in particular, you can see there in that picture on the right, English ivy, Oriental bittersweet, kudzu, they climb the trees, they suffocate them, or they shade them out completely, and they ultimately kill them, and then they fall, and they're a safety hazard when that happens. So, you know, there's just lots of reasons why we need to be trying, particularly along stream corridors. I mean, it'll be very difficult to ever like totally eradicate invasive plants from our landscape in the South. I mean, it's probably never going to happen. But we can eradicate them in our stream corridors and along our lake shorelines. So the main thing that you can do about this situation, I mean, besides just developing and implementing an invasive plant eradication program on your own property, and there's lots of resources to help you do that. Cooperative Extension is a great resource for this, but there's tons of resources online to help you, you know what you need to get rid of and how to do it. But the main thing is just to avoid purchasing and planting non-native invasive plants. They are for sale. That tag right there is Swift Creek privet, which is a Chinese privet cultivar, and we took that picture in the Lowe's store, you know. So I mean, the stuff unfortunately is still for sale, and so it's really easy to see something and think, oh, that's pretty, you know, let's buy that and plant it. But you should really research it. And all you have to do is just Google. If you put in Swift Creek privet, the first thing that's going to pop up is the USDA's noxious weed non-native invasive plant website. So boom, there you go. It takes 3 seconds to know that you should not buy that and that you should choose something different. So, alrighty, I think that's what I've got for y'all today. So I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Callie, for all of that wonderful information. As she mentioned, please feel free to ask any questions. You can put them in the chat or unmute yourself. And I actually have a quick question just to get us started. So I was wondering if there are any situations where ripraps might be the better solution, because I've seen some stream restoration projects that are using those instead of bioengineering. So I was just wondering if there might be a reason for that.
In very urban environments, oftentimes that's the only solution, because if you just have so much stormwater that's just really overwhelming the system, and you don't have enough room to appropriately create the natural pattern and profile. I mean, if you're in an urban environment, you can't recreate the natural pattern and profile because the watershed runoff looks so much different. Right. And so, yes, in urban environments, oftentimes you do have to use riprap. But even if you are riprapping your stream bank, because that's really your only alternative, first of all, please use black felt underneath it. Anytime you're putting rocks on dirt, you need the black filter fabric felt. And it's anywhere that stuff like that is sold, you can find it. But also plant native trees and shrubs. At the top of the bank, wherever you can stick them in, you know, because that will still provide shade and habitat resources.
Gotcha, thanks. Yeah, I think I saw that in Athens on Tanyard Creek, which is a really impaired stream there. And so that's completely urban. So that makes sense.
And in some cases, you know, it does, you know, you're still taking care of the erosion problem. And so, you know, if that's the only way you can get it done, then great. But 9 times out of 10, if you're not in a super urban environment, you can bioengineer it. So I dropped in the link to the live link to the native invasive plant info page also. So
thanks. I'm really looking forward to looking into that resource. Thanks for sharing that. We did have a question from Anya come in. She says, do you follow up on these projects that you work on, and if so, what do you see happening to the stream bank over time, and is there continual maintenance that needs to be done?
Great question. The answer is yes. We do follow up on all of our projects through time. In most cases, particularly for the larger projects, we do have a written agreement with the landowners so that it's laid out like what their expectations are and what our expectations are. But now in the case of like the Swanee project on the Ivy Log, that landowner paid for everything himself. And we just literally provided technical assistance and guidance for the contractor that he hired and paid. And so in those cases, you know, if the landowner decides later on that he doesn't want that anymore, or he sells the property and somebody else cuts the trees down, there's little we're going to do about it. But I can tell you that most of these landowners, after we get through working with them, like they understand what's up and they know what needs to be done to maintain them. But in the case of our larger restoration projects, we actually have either a 30-year agreement with the landowner that does get registered with the deed and is transferable, or a permanent conservation easement. So we hold, and our soil and water conservation districts hold easements on about 6 miles of streams and rivers in the Hiwassee River watershed, where we've done, major work that required a lot of investment of tax dollars. And some of those projects have been sold and the new landowners are thrilled to learn all about it. I mean, I've been so surprised because I thought when we first started doing this, like, 20 years ago, I thought, when these projects go to change hands, people are going to freak out that it has an easement on it, and everything. But that just really has not happened. It has been a benefit to the sale of the land, not a hindrance.
That's awesome. Thanks, Callie, for sharing. Gretchen wants to know, what are some of your nursery sources that you get your native plants?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Mountain True is actually working on a web page where we're going to provide nursery links. We're actually going to start, it's in our strategic planning that we're doing right now. We're going to start a campaign to get nurseries in our coverage area, which is 26 counties, again, that includes Townsend, Union, and North Georgia, to stop selling invasive plants. And so, it's going to be a huge advocacy campaign, but as part of that, we have to be able to tell people where they can get the native plants, right? So in Union County, Georgia, we have this awesome tree nursery called Southern Roots Tree Nursery, and he actually grows and sells to us wholesale for our restoration projects, but he sells to other people too. He does not have a storefront, but you can contact him and, purchase trees there. We also have a couple of other nurseries that are on the North Carolina side of the line that specialize in native plants, even though they may not have 100% native plants, and they're an option. But there are several large nurseries online. Carolina Native Nursery is one of the biggest ones, where we've ordered many native trees and shrubs, and especially more ornamental types of things. And it's totally fine, a lot of times it's totally fine if you have a decent nursery that has good reviews and it's been around a long time, to order those plants through the mail. We've ordered many plants through the mail, just my husband and I, and it's amazing how they can make it work for the shipping and everything, but they do, and they thrive. So if you can't find a local native nursery, and I would just go around your nurseries and be like, do you have native plants? And just let them show you and let them know that you want native plants. And the more people that do that, the more native plants they're going to have to offer, right? So, and also Mountain True has if you're interested in just driving up to the Hiwassee River watershed on a Saturday in November, we have a native tree and shrub sale that has 36 different species of native trees and shrubs, many of which are ornamentals. And it's a fundraiser for us. And so we start taking orders. Everything's online. You can order online and see all the species and everything. But we start taking orders in mid-September. And then, so you order and pay. And then the pickup date is the second or third Saturday in November. So everybody just comes and picks up their orders.
Great. Thanks, Callie. We have another question from Vicky. She asks, do you have a template for that contract with the landowner that you can share?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Yeah, you can just email me. Here, I'll put my email address. We have several different ones, actually.
And then she had
one of them is based on the Partners for Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife's private landowner program that only operates in priority targeted watersheds, but we based our landowner agreement off of their landowner agreement. They have a 5-year agreement with their partners for fish and wildlife people. So, yeah.
And then she had a second question. Do you have any native ground cover plants that you can suggest?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So my colleague Tony Ward is our plant man. He could not be here today to do the plant portion of this talk, but we can definitely get you that information. It's hard. Ground cover is the hardest one. So many times we end up having to use a ground cover that is not native, but is also not invasive. So sometimes you just have to strike that balance.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. If I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any questions, if y'all have any other ones, feel free to unmute and address Callie or throw them in the chat. Yeah, Tony. Email is in there. I remember I went on one of y'all's stream restoration tours before I started this job, and I was like, wow, this guy knows more about plants than I know about anything. Like, he is awesome.
Yeah.
Y'all's projects are truly incredible, and just getting to see those comparisons that you showed on the screen, that was really, really incredible. So thank you so much. Do you have like I don't know, like a favorite project or a favorite type that you prefer to work on? I don't know, in terms of like results or just what you find best?
I don't know. They're all so fun and they're all unique. But really the ones that we can really fix with just the sloping and the planting, those are they're so great because they're so low cost and they end up being really nice for the landowners. A lot of times we're able to provide river access, as part of the project. And so I guess those are probably my favorite. It's sad when, somebody's got a piece of property where, it's below a dam or something like that. That's another place where we have to use riprap. I'm glad I mentioned that because below dams, hydroelectric dams or whatever, a lot of times that's our only option because the flow is just like they just come on and it's 100-year flood in an hour. And so those are sad projects for me because it's just, it just stinks for those people that have these historical problems or problems that are beyond any of our control, that require these less than nice solutions.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to throw them in. I know that Tony's doing a tour this weekend, right? Of sites and kind of
his Saturday's thing is a winter tree ID workshop. But if anybody wanted to come up here from that, I'm sure he could take you around to a couple places afterwards if you were interested in seeing that. But yeah, that's in Hiwassee, Georgia, Saturday at 10.
Cool, thanks. And all of y'all's events are, I know you mentioned like if you're a member, you get kind of a discount or whatever, but I would definitely recommend checking out any of the tours or events that they have up there. Just like with any of our local coordinators, y'all are super knowledgeable and always really great at showcasing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not all of our events and outings cost, but because that one is more of a workshop and is requiring a lot of expertise, that's why it has such a cost.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
I enjoyed it.
I threw the link to the registration for this weekend in the chat as well. So if anybody is interested in signing up for that in the area, then they can do that on that link. So,
and just FYI, we are part of Georgia Adopt a Stream. We have a big team up here, and so we often have workshops and things, and not so much during COVID, but you can look for workshops in our area, and if you're interested in talking about any of this other stuff, we can definitely do that too.
Great, thank you so much, Callie. So I guess we're just gonna go ahead and do some of our closing remarks and reminders. So if you don't already, please feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to keep up with all of our upcoming events and kind of follow what we're doing and everything like that. We do have several more amazing sessions coming up this week. We're only about halfway through, maybe about halfway through. So definitely check out our registration page to register for some of the events that are coming up this week. And don't forget about our first ever Wonder of Water weekend. So Mountain Truths event this weekend is part of all of those events. We have a bunch of different exciting workshops and stream tours and all that stuff happening this weekend all across the state. So definitely check that out if you have not already. And finally, if you are not able to join a session that is interesting to you, then all of our sessions are being recorded and posted onto our YouTube channel and also onto our resources and recordings page on our website. And everything that I just mentioned has now been posted in the chat, so you can just check that out if you want more information.
Yeah, and then so all of those are in there together. There is a session survey link if you guys wouldn't mind clicking on that and taking a survey just about your experience in this session. We would greatly appreciate it, just so we can work out, logistics, or if there's anything that we can do better to improve if we ever have to have a virtual conference again, or just future virtual events. We would really appreciate your feedback. And then there's the Adopt a Stream email in the chat as well. And we are more than happy to answer any questions, connect you with any of our speakers throughout this week, whatever it may be. Please feel free to send us an email. And then last but not least, we do have some t-shirts this year that Anya mentioned earlier. We're pretty excited about them. Cecilia designed our pretty classic design there that we have going on this year. And they're all long sleeve. We have a few colors for you to choose from. $8 shipped right to your door. Lots of great things about them. But if you're going to check them out, we have that link there for you to order. And yeah, I think that's it. Jackie says, thanks, Anya and Callie. Great and informative presentations. Again, we just really appreciate y'all being here. We are going to take a quick 2-minute break, and then we're going to come back for just like 10 to 15 minutes of some networking, chatting about whatever we want to chat about. And we also are going to do a quick prize drawing as soon as we get back too. So we'll say farewell for those of you that have to leave, but see you soon to those that can join us in 2 minutes. So thanks, everyone.